Welcome back to our floor preparation segment of our acid staining training course. In this, I'll get into more detail about what we like to see when we prepare a concrete basement floor, for example, or a commercial or industrial floor before we acid stain it. So in this module, I'll go over some of the details of the various and sundry types of contaminants that can be on the concrete that you may or may not want to address depending on the degree of cleanliness that you want your floor. But we'll touch base on just about anything that we've come across and the industry over 45 years of installing acid stain projects. So you want to ask yourself, the number one question is just to what extent is this floor ready or not ready? For example, are we looking at a lot of surface types of contaminants like sheetrock contaminants from the guys that did the mudding and taping of the sheetrock? How about adhesives from the contractors that did the framing when it's squeezed between the floor joists and the subfloors that spilled onto the floor? What about the plumbers? How about some of their glues or adhesives that may have spilled on to the floor, their copper drippings from their soldering and such of copper joints, if there's such a thing anymore. Paint overspray is a big deal. Probably one of the biggest contaminant problems in trying to get concrete clean is paint overspray. If they've taken their doors and trim or any other cabinetry or what have you down in the basement and tried to paint it down there, that's not uncommon to see. So, and especially if it's been covered with carpet and carpet padding, if this is an older home that you're trying to remodel and you pull that stuff up and boom, there that stuff stares you right in the face. So your floor scraper comes in handy for everything that's contaminated that sits on the surface of the concrete that's bulk, like the sheetrock drippings of the mud, the glue, adhesives, and bulk paints and that sort of thing. That'll help to get that off with a floor scraper or a margin trowel. And the next level from there is to use hot water. Hot water takes care of all of the water-based products like your acrylic, paint overspray and the sheetrock drippings from the mud. Things like glue adhesives, other types of contaminants that are solvent-based require a solvent to remove them and their stains. You typically can use acetone or xylene are a couple of solvent products that you can use that will remove those. You have to get down on your knees and your hands to be able to do that and really scrub at it till you can see that come off there. You'll want to use, a word of caution is you want to ventilate when you use these solvents. Remember that they're flammable and you want to be sure that if you've got a flame down in your basement, for example, if you've got a utility room or a mechanical room where you've got a hot water heater or a furnace that is running off of gas, you're going to want to shut those off so that there's no open flame when you're using any types of solvent products, just so you know those fumes are flammable and you could have a real bad accident. So word of caution to you when you're doing floor prep with solvents. Open the windows, let that thing ventilate, turn on a fan, all that sort of thing. And you're going to need a carbon-filled respirator if you're going to be using solvent-based cleaners because of the fumes. Once again, the toxic fumes. To block those out, you have to use a carbon-filled IBM type of respirator to filter that stuff out so that you don't get fixated. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but occasionally we do have to use those products to get some of those contaminants out of the floor. Otherwise, those stains will reflect through the acid stain because, as you know, they're the colorants, the acid stain colorants, are semi-transparent. So as we described earlier on in our overview of the acid staining course is that these are going to reflect through like a wood stain. The grain and the variations of the concrete will reflect through the same as if you stained a piece of wood, furniture, so keep that in mind. Once you have all of those elements taken care of, there's sometimes the chalk lines, the snap lines from the framers when they put down the bearing walls in the basement on your concrete. To get those chalk lines out, the best thing to use is vinegar, and use white vinegar to get that stuff out, because the solvents don't cut it quite enough. And honestly, I don't know the chemical reaction as to why the vinegar works better, but use white vinegar so it doesn't leave a stain behind after you've rubbed it out. Takes a little elbow grease and some time and patience, but you can get most of those chalk lines out by using white vinegar. So that pretty well covers most everything that you would need to know about cleaning contaminants in the concrete. The other thing that we've briefly covered is if you've got more damage to your concrete, like chipping, flaking, spalling, low spots that require a patch and a fill, or excessive cracking that you're not happy with, these are an entirely different animal when we get into this kind of thing. It just gets so much more involved if you have to do lots of crack filling, patching, leveling, and resurfacing. This course does not involve the details in floor prepping with damaged concrete to that extent. That would be a whole new video in and of itself, and a course in and of itself, because it gets to be so involved. Keep in mind that the idea, as we've mentioned before, is that these acid stains are meant to be a rustic, old world, old Mexico kind of a look. And so 99.9% of these concrete floors that have cracks in them, or incidental chips or gouges or scratches, are all just a part of the look and the aesthetic appeal to the finish of an acid stain floor. You might ask yourself, well, what about tack strips all around the perimeter? Same thing. You know, it's a part of your floor that's extremely rare that people look at. It's not a part of the wall or the floor that people are looking at directly as it is in the middle of your room. Whether it's a rec room or it's a bedroom, or if it's a mechanical room, a kitchen, those areas really where you've got tack strip and you're remodeling this thing, I wouldn't worry about it. Just remember, if you patch those, they will reflect through probably worse than if you just left them alone. But it's entirely up to you. You can't patch and repair any old concrete, or new for that matter, and get it to blend exactly with the existing concrete. And it's because you're simply using a different material. It's not the same identical thing as when they first poured the concrete when you're doing a patch and a repair. You're just using a different product, and as a result you get a different look. So keep that all in mind. This covers pretty much most of the floor prep. I will have attached to follow this these comments here with pictures and maybe some video footage, and afterwards I'll share with you my conclusions. This segment is from our overview outline. This is a good review of the simple hand tools and the shop vac that'll be involved in getting your concrete all cleaned up for your acid staining. We'll go over some of the contaminants that are typical in a basement floor, and hopefully we cover most of them. Before we begin though, let's pre-qualify your concrete project to make sure it's a good candidate for this course. If your concrete looks anything like this one, then you have a great qualifier and is a beautiful candidate to turn out a beautiful project, and you can go into it with full confidence that this will turn out to be absolutely stunning. We're going to leave these cracks just the way they are because they are a part of that rustic look in acid staining, and you really don't notice them all that much when you get finished with the work. On the other hand, if your concrete looks anything like this, it's not a good candidate for this particular course, as we're not going to cover what it would require for you to be able to get this concrete in condition to receive an acid stain. You can see here by this footage that it's just riddled to pieces with all kinds of coatings, adhesives, glues, patterns from tile, linoleum, carpet glue. It's got everything wrong with this piece of concrete to be able to work with this directly as it shows here in this footage. This particular project was required an overlay. We call it a micro overlay, where the concrete is completely resurfaced again so that it then can become renewed like it was originally before all of the carpets and the tile and laminates were placed on it. And so it would be another day, it would be another course that we would have to develop for this kind of concrete, if it's in this condition, for you to be able to make it look beautiful in an acid stain. But the biggest one and the most difficult one is the overspray from painting. What you'll use is hot water to get this all kind of softened up before you use a margin trowel or a putty knife, or these painters' multi-tools are great that you're seeing used in this particular example to get that up. It's a lot of work, but it's worth getting all that up so that that doesn't reflect through your project. If you have snap lines, chalk lines from the framers down on the concrete, the white vinegar is the best way to get that up, along with just a simple cotton rag. Once again, just a lot of elbow grease to get that stuff up, but it's worth getting those lines out so they don't reflect through your project. The other typical contaminants are from the plumber's PVC glue, and it drips down from they're putting their joints together. Typically that can come up with this floor scraper you can see used here, or else you can use a margin trowel to remove that. Typically it doesn't absorb down into the concrete as it just sits on top there, and it's usually chips off pretty readily. The other thing that you'll typically see is the adhesive and the glues from the framers when they put in their floor joists and their subfloors that drips down onto the floor. You can use a margin trowel like you can see used in this example here to get that off. Sheetrock is the biggest deal along with what's most common, because there's more spills and drips from the guys when they do their mudding and taping. Take the time to get this up. It's not too big of a deal depending on how bad it's spread, but then you'll want to go behind it with hot water and a cotton rag to get that all off out of the concrete. Go around your sheetrock real well with a shop vac. I recommend that you clean up as best as you can all the debris from the construction that's gotten up underneath the sheetrock, so that it's not pulled out with your brush when you cut in edges when you're going to be doing your epoxy clear coat and finish coat. If you've got control joints cut into the concrete like this, just use your margin trowel or a floor scraper to get all the debris out of those joints, and then your shop vac will take care of the rest. And then last but not least, clean things up really good with the mop and the mop bucket afterwards, so you can get all the dust, debris, and anything else that's on the concrete. It'll help you to see any contaminants you may have missed too, to have the water onto the concrete. Try to get your water as clean as you can. I wouldn't get too stressed over it, since it is you got to neutralize and clean up after you acid stain anyway, and that should pretty much cover everything for us. Also, if you do need to mask off an area, we recommend this 3M masking hand machine, along with the premium grade Contractor's Green 12-inch paper. This will resist any bleeding if you have areas that you don't want any of the stain to pass through. All right, so that pretty much covers in pretty much detail. I can't think of anything I may have overlooked in the details of the floor prepping side of things. Hopefully this gives you confidence and reassurance as to the approach that you need to take and to be prepared with before you're applying your acid stain. In the next module, that will be the fun in this whole process, is actually applying the acid stain and the tools associated with that. So we'll see you on that side of our acid staining training course.